I'm going to put together a video on how I established the spring head. It is a large amount of water that flows out of the mountainside. It's been fed down to the house for many years from a cistern. There are three separate pieces. This is one of the three pieces right in this immediate area where water flows out. It's year round, it's continuous, it's clean. Right now it is fed from underneath that rock. There's a little metal box that gathers the water, feeds it through a tube. The tube goes to the cistern and down to the house, but it's starting to pick up sediment. So I have piped two of the other three, and I'm going to pipe this one. It's a 2-inch piece of PVC with holes drilled in the side, laid flat in the bottom of the ditch so that the sediment off the bottom, because there is sand, as you can see, I've disturbed the area with my hand. I've been digging. I can't get up under the rocks because, well, it's a bunch more rocks, and I've reached in there and pulled out what I can, but these are the size of like small cars. They're not going anywhere. So the object is feed into three pipes into the pieces of pipe behind me, which I'll explain later. I'm going to take all this dirt out, and in that place I will set this down with some filter gravel. And by filter gravel, it's a small crushed gravel. And on top of that will be slightly larger rocks, and on top of that will be even larger rocks, in order to keep out any sediment or debris or material that might want to fall into the water and then end up inside my cistern. So just to get an idea, this is one of the two pipes. I mean, it's already piped and moving water, and here's the other one. I mean, a lot of water comes out of these. There's more than enough to feed multiple houses. So it's just a matter of gathering it. It's high enough above the house that it has good pressure and sending it down the pipe that's already in the ground. I cheated. I jumped ahead a little bit. I went ahead and dug out most of the small loose rock and gravel, sand, put the pipe in and took some hydraulic cement and cemented it in. If you've never worked with hydraulic cement, you might want to play with it a little bit first. Sometimes it can be too wet, sometimes it can be too dry. The trick is to get your consistency right. It says 3 to 5 minutes, but it will start setting fast if you have it right. So I'm going to take a rock, this large one here. I'm going to put it right in place where the water's flowing out here. I'm going to pack a bunch of hydraulic cement underneath it, stack the rock, let it cure, stack more rocks, just keep that sandwich layer going of building it up. And the idea is to build it up so that I can put this gravel in behind the wall that I build. Now the gravel's dirty, so let me rinse it off. But the gravel stacked behind the wall will filter out any sediment or material that, not any, but it'll filter out some of the thicker, heavy stuff that could get in there, leaves or whatever else. Keep it out of the water supply. I mean, most of it's coming out of the mountain, and about all you really get is river rock. Behind me, there's a bunch of really, like, I don't know, sandy material where I've been stirring here. I keep digging and digging, and the more I dig, I mean, I'm moving sand and sediment. Look back here, you can see where it's going. It's, you know, that's from me moving the rocks. The finer particulates go on down. That's what I want to keep out of my well, or well, my cistern, my spring water goes to the house. I have filters to get it out once it gets down there, but I will dam this up like I did the other three, and when the water is deep enough and the pipes are full, it just flows over top of the rock wall. I mean, the excess water continues to go on down, and the stream basically remains unaffected from this point on. So let me show you how I did this. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead again. I've gone ahead and I've tied all the pipes together. They all feed into a T that's turned on its side and goes pretty deep. One feeds out of that one. There's another pipe that goes back into the bank, and then the third one that I've been showing you and working on. I went ahead and stuffed a bunch of rocks up in the bank, filled the holes as best I can, and put a nice flat spot for the large rock. And it just, the more you build a wall, the higher up the water comes. In a minute, I'm going to stop it, but for now, all of these pipes are in place, and it's a 2-inch pipe. I think I said 1.5 inches earlier, but 2-inch pipe, 2-inch pipe, 2-inch pipe, to 3-inch pipe, to 6-inch T. The T is turned on its side so that those two 1-inch lines that come in, all the like loose sediment, not all of it, most of it should settle to the bottom. I've been stirring it up as I'm messing around, so it's getting in there. There's overflow holes drilled in the side. If it gets deep enough, it'll actually come out. My pipe on the top, the coupling with the cap is actually a different size. It's oversized from the blue sewer pipe, so that even if those holes get clogged, it still has a gap all the way around to run out when I put the screw top on. Now, I live in the mountains of Virginia, and it gets cold. It freezes here on a regular basis. But all this water flowing, coming straight out of a mountain, it'll never freeze, or never should freeze. The spring water won't. Not 100% sure the pipes won't. Don't think they will. So what I did is I didn't actually glue them together. It's glued, the cap is glued on the end of that. This 90 is glued onto the pipe that comes out of the bank, but not the trunk line or whatever you want to call it that runs back. None of that's glued, but it's secure. I mean, it's tight. I had to pry it, bend it into place, so it should be fine. It will also make it a lot easier if something goes wrong and I have to then stop and come back and take it apart. I'm going to try and stop this up now, which is a lot of water, so we'll get on with that. This is the finished product. Well, not fully finished. I piled all the rocks up, I built the wall. It was pushing a lot of water through. I also went ahead and packed a lot of the gravel around the T to stabilize it. It's stable. If you back up in the video and take a look, there's water coming out significantly more holes in the drain tube, because the more water I back up behind those rock walls, the higher, more pressure there is at this end. So it's coming out of all the holes now, which is way more than enough to feed what I need. It goes down the hill through those two lines into that. You can see the top of the cistern behind my truck. Well, part of the problem is the loggers there. My house is the mountain in the background valley. We're on the opposite side from me, but they cut some trees down across the spring. Actually, two of them. They're not supposed to mess in water, but talk to the regulations. They won't really do anything about it. There's logging roads right up there that actually drive back and forth right through what would be the stream. If it rains significantly, it makes a big mess. They're not real good at regulating anything. The logging industry is kind of weak compared to highways or mining, but I will continue to argue it won't matter. A couple things to think about is head pressure. It works real well for me because this spring is a couple 100 feet above my house. We actually have a pressure reducer just to back the pressure down to 75 psi. I believe it was 150, 160, somewhere in there. It's an amazing amount of pressure, but we are way up on the opposing mountain. So I have no pressure problems. I have no flow problems. It might be different for each individual person, situation. For us, it works out well. Something else to think about is, what do you do with the water? I mean, when ours gets down to the house, there are two spin down filters and another 1 micron filter that filters out anything, and all it should be pure when it comes out. The two spin downs remove any sand or sediment. The first one gets the larger grain, the second one gets a smaller. I'm not a huge fan of the style of those filters. I mean, I guess they're better than other filters, being that they take them apart, you clean them, but we're cleaning them on a regular basis. Hopefully this will reduce it. The 1 micron filter in theory should basically purify the water. We've had the water tested. They're really, the water was fine. It showed a high amount of insolubles, but that was mostly due to sediment. I mean, you can see it in the filter, so you know it's there. I mean, even fine leaf particulate coming through all those rocks over time, it breaks down. You end up with real fine, they were calling them, I believe it was insoluble was the word, but basically something that doesn't dissolve into the water. It's not chemicals dissolved in it, it's actually particulates floating in it, even though they're very fine, they're suspended in the water. So the filters take care of it. Afterwards, it was a very acceptable rate. I could get a better final filter, and it would be like, say, a ceramic filter and come out as clean water. But I'm not potting this, I'm not selling this. It's for the house, it's perfectly fine as it is. Because I'm actually making this video and editing it more than 2 months after I actually filmed the video, I can say now that we have taken cleaning the filters sometimes. If it rains, we had to clean it more often. We were picking up more of the leaf matter and the stuff that was washing into the creek, because in theory we were picking up water about where the T is right now instead of back in the banks where it should have been. At that point, we could have to clean the filters at the house 2 or 3 times a day, where now we might have to clean it, if it pours rain, every 2 days. So it has made a huge difference by picking up water from back in the bank. I will come back and mess with it more, because in all honesty, I would rather come up here and I don't have to come up here and do anything on a regular basis, but I do have to clean the filters at the house. And I would rather come up here and clean out the T and clean out the cistern every other month, and rarely, if ever, have to do anything down at the house at the filter level. I'm not sure I can ever get to that with the way the water is. I'm just happy that it's been reduced from multiple times a day during the rain to every couple days. And in theory, we shouldn't get any animal crap or bugs, or, well, I mean, we might get some sort of small bugs, but anything else in there. With the water flowing out of those holes, nothing should flow back in. I mean, they flow out above the water level, so at the water you see exposed to the air and the trees and everything else wouldn't be flowing back into my pipes once it exits the rock wall. It Because the rocks are stacked higher, the water level behind the rocks is higher than the water level out of the T. So that makes the water inside the T higher. So it should always be coming out and never back in. I mean, 20 years of, or longer. I mean, the people that put this in probably put this in 40 years ago. I know I've lived there for more than 20 years of my life, and we have always drank this. It's perfectly fine. So, and I'll just put the cap on it, screw it down, and come back up here and clean it out in a couple months. Or I'll come check it in a couple weeks, but no big deal. I hope this has been informative. Someone who wants to try and develop a spring. I put a decent amount of thought into it, did a lot of research. There are multiple different ways of doing it, but in my particular situation, this is the one that worked best for me, being that I got lucky and the pipes were already run. If I had to do it over, the cost that it took to run the pipes, however far down the mountain they go, quite a ways, it would be cheaper to dig a spring or dig a well instead of try and do this with a spring. But it was here, so this is what we did. And we should have many more years of good, clean, fresh mountain water.